Hey guys, I'm back to do another character review. Like my friend mentioned in his video, this time we're reviewing, Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty and the three gargoyles from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He did his review of the gargoyles yesterday, and I'm here today to do my Maleficent review. Anyway, the complaints that she usually gets are, she's scary, she's dull, boring, and one-dimensional, she has no personality, she's stupid, and I'll give you some examples of why people think she's stupid when I get to that complaint. She's a weak villain with weak motives, she's overrated, the only reason people like her is because they think her superpowers are cool. She was defeated too easily, and of course, since she's a villain, she's evil. Obviously not my opinion. Anyway, starting with the whole, she's scary. As I've mentioned in several character reviews, like my Beast review, and my Ursula review, scary is very much in the eye of the beholder. That's a very personal thing. Personally, I never found Disney villains to be very scary. I loved them even as a child. But there were some things that I was scared of that, most people weren't. I think that the only Disney villain that ever actually kind of creeped me out was, Sid from Toy Story, but, I was actually more scared of his mutant toys than I was of him. Like I mentioned in my Ursula review, the flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz scared me. So it's a very individual thing. And yeah, I could see how, especially in her dragon form, she would definitely scare children. I mean, I actually read in an article about when the movie of Sleeping Beauty was first released, that, she was so scary in dragon form that, there were several children that left the theater crying. I guess know your child, know what scares them, and if your child does find that kind of thing frightening, then don't let them watch Sleeping Beauty. Of course, on the other hand, it is a good thing to let your child get a little bit out of their comfort zone and see some kind of scary cartoon bad guys. And I mean, if you still find her scary as an adult, then my advice to you is don't watch the movie. So, to each their own. If you're a parent, know your child and know what scares them. If you think she's going to be very frightening to your child, then don't let your child watch Sleeping Beauty. But if you think it's just going to be a little bit out of your child's comfort zone, then that might be a good thing for your child, to get a little bit out of their comfort zone. But if you're an adult and you for some reason are still scared of her, then don't watch the movie. She's boring, dull, and one-dimensional. Well, I wouldn't say that she's the most complex villain ever. I mean, I wouldn't put her to the level of, like, Mr. Freeze from Batman. He's definitely more complex than she is. She's definitely not the most complex villain ever, but when I think of one-dimensional, boring villains, I think of somebody like, Ratcliffe from Pocahontas, who, pretty much his only personality trait is, he's greedy and he wants gold and, doesn't want to deal with the quote-unquote savage Native Americans. So, I mean, basically he's racist and greedy. To me, that's much more of a boring one-dimensional villain than Maleficent is. I mean, yeah, she's definitely not the most complex villain, but... And a lot of these do kind of overlap. I'll cover more of this in later complaints, but she does... She does have a little bit of depth to her personality, like, when she kind of toys with Philip, and, shows him how... shows him how it's going to be when, she lets him out, 100 years from now as a withered old man. So, she definitely has a wicked sense of humor, and some depth to her personality. Not a ton of depth, not a ton of layers, but definitely not boring, dull, and one-dimensional, in my opinion. Boring is very much in the eye of the beholder, sort of just like Scary is. And if you find her boring, that's more your personal taste. But I personally don't. I think that she's very fun and interesting to watch. And if you find her boring, that's your personal opinion, but I definitely wouldn't classify her as dull and one-dimensional. So, I'm not gonna get too deep into this because I've been over it in several character reviews. I mean, there are characters that I find interesting that other people find boring, and characters that I find boring that other people find interesting. If you find her boring, that's your opinion, but, and I do to an extent get the, get that complaint that she's not uber complex, but I do to an extent get the... Ugh, sorry, I got off track. I do to a small extent get that. I wouldn't classify her as the most interesting villain, the most complex, or the most complex villain ever, but I also wouldn't categorize her as boring, dull, and one-dimensional. Anyway, moving on. She has no personality. Well, in my opinion, something that I've noticed in doing my character reviews, there's really no such thing as a character with no personality, unless you're talking about an extremely minor background character with only 1 or 2 lines. I mean, there have been several characters that have been accused of this. Other characters from Maleficent's movie, such as, Aurora and Philip, and to me they're much more, boring and one-dimensional than she is. But anyway, um, Aurora and Philip, Snow White's Prince and Prince Charming, Lola Bunny from Space Jam, Elsa from Frozen, and a bunch of other ones. Odette from The Swan Princess, Madeline from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, too. There have been a bunch of characters that have been accused of having no personality, and while a character might not have a deep personality, while they might have a one-dimensional personality, while their personality might not be something that appeals to you, while it might not be very well developed, all characters have some sort of personality, unless you're talking about an extremely minor background character that only has one or two lines. So, this complaint is very illegitimate when it comes to pretty much basically all the characters that I just listed. And like I said, if Maleficent is boring in your opinion, then that's your personal opinion, but she definitely has a personality. It may not be one you like, but she's got a personality. She's stupid because she sends the goons after Aurora instead of going herself, and she used a complicated curse to kill Aurora instead of just killing her. Stupid is another one of those complaints that gets thrown around way too much. And so far, the only 3 characters that are arguably stupid that we've reviewed are, Anastasia Tremaine, Launchpad McQuack, and, Hugo, who was, in the Gargoyle review that my friend just did, and actually all the gargoyles were accused of being stupid, so, that's, 2 1/3 of the character review that we've done, where it's been a arguably legitimate complaint. Okay, while I suppose those might have been arguably stupid decisions on her part, like sending the goons after Aurora, you have to keep in mind that this is a frickin' fairy tale. It runs on fairy tale logic, not real-life logic. So if she had gone after Aurora herself and found her, then the story would have been over. That's like that's like when people accuse fairy tale princes and princesses of marrying somebody they just met. It's fairy tale logic. It runs on emotion and not logic. So, I mean, yeah, I suppose it was arguably a stupid decision, and she, I guess, could have come up with something that didn't look so stupid, but to me, I always chalked it up to fairy tale logic. I mean, think about all of the fairy tales you've seen where people have done something that would have been stupid in real life. And the whole, she used a complicated curse to kill Aurora instead of just killing her. again, that's pretty much fairy tale logic. Because if she had just clicked her there would have been no story. And also, kind of like her toying with Philip and showing him what it would be like when she released him in 100 years. I think that she was kind of toying with Stefan and Aurora's mother, hoping to have them live in fear for 16 years. Be fearful of their daughter's life and everything. So, that's somewhat fairy tale logic and somewhat her wicked sense of humor working there. So, you really need to think about the logic or lack thereof that runs through fairy tales, and also think about Maleficent's personality and how she loves to toy with people. And that's one of the reasons why I think she has a much deeper personality than a lot of people give her credit for. Like I said, not an uber deep one, but still a pretty deep personality. She's a weak villain with weak motives. Yeah, her motives are pretty weak. I mean, she's seeking revenge for not being invited to a party. But that doesn't exactly make her a weak villain. I mean, a villain doesn't have to be out for world domination in order for them to be, in order for them to be a good villain. I mean, my favorite villain, Cruella de Vil, her entire motive is, getting herself a Dalmatian skin coat. And I still think that she's a great, strong villain. And, to me, in some ways, having kind of a weaker motive makes the villain even more epic. That they would be so evil and do so much for out of so very little motives, and it leaves you kind of imagining, what would they do if they had stronger motives? I mean, when I think of a weak villain, I think of somebody like Prince John from Robin Hood, who's basically a crybaby and does nothing but cry for his mommy and send the sheriff out to get money from the poor people. And yeah, I know his motive is probably in some ways stronger than Maleficent's since he wants to be king, but to me he's also a lot weaker because he's such a wuss. So just because a villain's motives are kind of weak, that doesn't equal a weak villain. I think that you've got those kind of confused. She's overrated. Not really. Not in my opinion. When I think of overrated characters, I think of, the Frozen characters. I mean, they're freaking everywhere. Um, and, a lot of them aren't very well written, and they get a lot of undeserved praise. But even if she is somewhat overrated in your opinion, that doesn't make her a bad character. To me, that sounds more like you've got a problem with Maleficent's fans praising her than you do Maleficent herself. I mean, I personally think that Elsa from Frozen is pretty overrated at this point. I mean, she's not a very well written character, and she does have a lot of fans ignoring the fact that she's not very well written and that sort of thing. But I still do like her a lot as a character. So just because a character is overrated, that doesn't mean that they're a bad character. And that doesn't mean that you should dislike them. So while I do understand that a character being overrated can get annoying, and that you can get tired of seeing, and tired of seeing their stuff everywhere and their praises everywhere and that sort of thing, that doesn't make them a bad character. That sounds more like you've got a problem with the fans praising them and that sort of thing. The only area where I'd say that sorry, I got tongue-tied. I mean, the only place where I'd say Maleficent gets a lot of advertising and stuff that's nothing compared to, like, the Frozen characters is she's pretty much the head villain in the Disney Villains franchise, but that's still nothing compared to the Frozen stuff that's everywhere. So, I mean, if you look up Disney villains, you're definitely going to see, Maleficent all over the ads and the posters and banners and stuff, and merchandise of Disney villains. Since she's pretty much their main villain, sort of like Cinderella is the most iconic Disney princess, but I still wouldn't say that that's overrated. I mean, even though Cruella's my favorite, not just Disney villain, but villain period, I admit that Maleficent probably deserves to be the main Disney villain, since she's a lot more iconic, and actually probably more well recognized by fans. Anyway, the only reason people like her is because they think her superpowers are cool. Really? 'Cause, like I just mentioned, one of the reasons that I like her a lot is because of her wicked sense of humor that adds a lot of depth to her personality. I mean, yeah, her superpowers do... I do like those a lot, but, excuse me. And I think that those do look cool, but... And it's fun to watch her use those, but that's far from the only reason that I like her. I mean, as I mentioned before, I wouldn't say that she's an uber complex villain, but she's definitely got some depth to her. Like, if you watch her carefully, you can tell that she enjoys toying with people and does have a wicked sense of humor, and she's also got a lot of class to her. So to me, she's a very interesting character, superpowers or not, and to me that sounds more like, again, you've got a problem with Maleficent's fans than Maleficent herself. She was defeated too easily. This one I do get to an extent. I mean, they probably could have come up with a better way of defeating her than that little tiny sword stabbing her in her huge dragon form. But, I mean, I don't know, I guess, they could have had her being decapitated, which really would have scared kids. Yeah, they probably could have come up with a better way of her being defeated than just a little tiny sword stabbing her. At least, unlike with Ursula's defeat, that had the excuse of being magic. So it had a reason for defeating her. But like I mentioned in my Ursula review, just because you feel like a character, a villain was defeated too easily, that's not really a legitimate excuse to dislike the villain. I mean, yeah, with Maleficent and with Ursula, I think that they could have found some better reasons some better ways to defeat them. But, I still love both of them. And the fact that they were defeated a little too easily doesn't diminish my love for them. So, nice try, but pick a better reason than they were defeated too easily to dislike them. And of course, because she's a villain, she's evil. Seriously, while I can possibly see this as a reason for like a little kid, even though I loved the villains when I was practically since birth, I do not see this as a legitimate reason for an adult. I mean, I understand that not everybody is a die-hard animated villains fan like I am. I understand that, and I'm not trying to persuade you to be one. I mean, heck, I had imaginary friends of the villains when I was a kid. But you didn't need to hear that. Sorry, that just slipped out. Now, I'm not trying to persuade you to be a die-hard villains fan like I am. But just because a character is a villain, that doesn't make them a bad character. And you know what I mean by bad. Yes, I know villains are generally evil, but that doesn't make them a bad character. And it's not really a legitimate reason to hate a character. They may not be your personal cup of tea. And yes, I will admit there are some poorly done, weak villains, like Prince John, Ratcliffe, Edgar from the Aristocats, I don't know, I can't think of many off the top of my head, there are definitely some poorly done weak villains that I'm not fond of. Um, but um, disliking hating a character strictly because they're evil and they're a villain is pretty much like disliking a character strictly because they're a sequel character or because they're a token chick. Yes, there are some poorly done sequel characters like Sarouche. Oh yeah, he's a good example of a poorly done sequel character and villain. and poorly done token chicks like Bo Peep from Toy Story. But categorizing, painting everything with a broad brush and categorizing all villains, all sequel characters, and all token chicks, all whatever, as bad is really pretty juvenile and immature. No offense, but it is. And whoever is doing it, whoever is doing this, please stop and start thinking about some of the well done characters that are that are in these categories that you're painting with a broad brush and automatically categorizing as bad. And that's all I have to say about these complaints. Anyway, I personally love Maleficent. She's definitely one of my favorite villains. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure about where she is as far as my favorites go. Probably fourth or fifth favorite animated villain, something like that. I have so many villains that I love that have such different personalities that it's hard to categorize them. But I definitely do love her, and she's definitely one of my favorites, is pretty pretty close after Cruella de Vil, Ursula, and Mr. Freeze, who are definitely my my three favorites. Anyway, the link to my friend's video will be in the comments section below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye, and see you next time.